Hey, how are you? This is confirmation. We are talking about the Small Catechism. So we have had several sessions where we talked about the Bible. And then last time we did a talk and I described how Luther came to produce the Catechism and said a few things about his role in the ongoing life of the church. So just the most important thing of all of that I would say to you today as review is that Luther did the large catechism with an eye to, he had the family in mind, that the father, as the head of the household, would study the large catechism when teaching the small catechism to the children, and if there was any servants and so forth, so that the instruction in the Christian faith took place in the home. And this also fits with Luther's understanding, we'll get to that in a little bit, in the Ten Commandments about honor your father and mother. All authority in society, from the Lutheran perspective, is a derived authority from the parents, okay? So what that means is that God gives this authority over children to their parents, and the parents have this great responsibility to rear the children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, so that when they grow up and become adults, that they have the wherewithal to lead a good life righteously in the eyes of God and in the society in which they're born and so forth. And so if you have a teacher, that teacher's to be treated with respect and honor and so forth, because they are acting, and here's a Latin phrase for you, in loco parentis, which means in the place of the parent. Okay, so Luther extended that derived authority idea to teachers and to magistrates who rule in a city, law enforcement officers, and so forth, all the way up. So that as a disciple of Jesus Christ living in human community, I have this responsibility that comes from God, that I need to act in a certain responsible way toward others. And we'll get into what does honor mean. It doesn't mean troglodyte obedience, but it does mean respect and cooperation and so forth. So the large catechism is prepared by Luther for the parents, so that they have the biblical knowledge, the theological reflection, and so forth, to present the material in the small catechism in an effective way. So Luther's decision to do the catechism derived from an event where the Duke sent out teams of theologians and university professors and magistrates and so forth, and they literally went around and inspected all of the churches in the Duchy of Saxony. And it's called electoral Saxony because there's another Saxony as well. But the idea, it's a little bit foreign to us because we have the separation of church and state idea, which, by the way, is kind of a no man's land as opposed to an absolute wall. But in, medieval Germany, the government and the church work hand in glove together. And even today, the government's responsibility toward religion is to support it, which is kind of interesting. So, for example, the way money is done in German churches, and I don't understand this perfectly, but the way the money is done in German churches is the Internal Revenue Service collects it and distributes it to whichever the Christian confessions or other religions that you designate as yours, so that there's no collection plate kind of thing, dependency that we have. The IRS takes it. So if you're driving around Germany and you look and say, all these churches look relatively similar in size, the architectural style's different, but they're, good solid buildings in great shape, and they all seem to have a certain level of stuff and staffing and that kind of thing. There's a good reason for it. There is no Sunday school in Germany either. Luther was a very important person in the development of public education in Germany, and he pushed for public schools for both boys and girls so that they could read the scriptures in the catechism. And in Germany, you go to religious instruction as a part of the curriculum in the school. And it's not an everyday class, it's like once or twice a week kind of thing. And it starts in preschool, and they have a 13th year, because they count kindergarten and preschool, kindergarten, all the way through. So approximately the same ages as our people. And there is a point in time, very late in the process, where with parental consent, a child can get out of religious instruction into moral and ethical instruction. So you're going to get a theology, morality-based instruction as part of going to public school. So that's a little bit different as well. So here we are. After the tour, they were appalled at the conditions of the churches and took steps to fix the flow of the money and so forth. They were appalled at the competency of the clergy, and one of the things that they did was make university education mandatory for clergy, solving a whole plethora of problems doing that. But the thing that bothered Luther the most was the rank and file membership, the baptized, was not trained in any way, shape, or form. They knew nothing of the Christian faith. That they, were forced to attend Mass periodically. There were traveling troops of actors that did Bible stories at the fair. There were stained glass windows and church involvement in public ceremonies and so forth. But the people themselves were not trained in any way, shape, or form as disciples. So Luther's logic here in the catechisms is, what is the minimum level of knowledge that a person has to have in order to have any clue about what Christianity is about? Okay? So this is minimum stuff. And as I mentioned, for better part of 500 years, Lutherans memorized the Small Catechism and could recite the item and what it means on demand. And to be able to read the catechism and sign your name was, up until the start of World War II, the test for literacy in places like the old Prussian Union. So Luther thought, okay, what are the minimum things that they need to know? Well, the first thing that he thought they needed to know was basic morale, the basics of the faith. And he chose the 10 Commandments. The tables of the commandments, you always had Moses with two, arc tops, number of commandments down, usually just the numbers in the artwork. So Luther's looking at this, and it's been a common thing for centuries. It isn't unique to Luther, but part of the commandments talk about a person's relationship with God, and the other part talks about their relationship with other people. And so Luther leads off, section 1 of the Small Catechism. He has the 10 Commandments, then he has the Apostles' Creed, then he has the Lord's Prayer. The fourth thing is baptism. The fifth thing is some basic knowledge about the sacrament of the Lord's body and blood. So, starting off with the Catechism, the 10 Commandments. So the first one is You shall have no other gods. Period. All right? So this is found in 2 places in the Old Testament. Most common place that people go to is Exodus, because it's the story of the people of Israel. They get out of Egypt. They go to Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai, and they gather all around the base of the mountain, and Moses goes up for this meeting with God, and he comes back down with the commandments. And the 10 commandments are the summary of what is throughout the rest of the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and so forth. 613 specific thou shalt or thou shalt nots. So why 10? Unless you're sloppy with an axe, you're born with 10. And so for a summary of all the rest, this catches it, okay? So, first one, you shall have no other gods. All right? It actually says before me. So here's a distinctive thing about the Catechism. Luther provides a question. So we're going to get a question and answer format. There's going to be a statement, question, answer, and that's going to be kind of the pattern for these 5 pieces, all right? What does this mean? Veristas is what it is in German. What is that? So what does it mean to say you shall have no other gods? Now, the next thing that is part and parcel with the 10 Commandments, and you'll hear it over and over again, and you'll recognize it. The answer to Veristas is that we should fear, which means to have a really profound, healthy respect of, love, which is defined in 1 Corinthians 13. It's a whole manner of acting toward, and trust. So we should fear, love, and trust God above all things. Okay, so Luther tells us what the commandment is and how to keep it. So, first commandment, you shall have no other gods. None. Zip. Nada. What's a god? Well, that's a good question. I'll throw one at you. There was a Lutheran theologian at the University of Chicago. He was born and raised in Germany. He fled to the States for World War II. And somebody said, what's God? He goes, God is the existential manifestation of the ground of your being. In other words, God is that person, place, or thing, that noun that you derive the meaning of your life from. Okay? So, the God of Israel, who gave his name to Moses at the burning bush event, says, my name is Yahweh. It literally means I am, or I am who I am. And Jews don't say that name, because the commandment is, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And the safest way to not violate that commandment is don't say the name. So I have a rabbi friend, and whenever he refers to God, first of all, he always has a keppah, a yarmulke on his head as a sign of respect to God in case God gets mentioned or named unexpectedly in a conversation. And he always refers to God as the name, Yashem. Okay? So that way people know what he's talking about, but it's vague enough coming alongside of where he's not going to get in trouble for taking the name of the Lord in vain. So, second commandment, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So, what does this mean? Veristas. We should fear and love God so that we do not curse, we do not swear, we do not use satanic arts or deceive by his name. So don't do those things, but call on it in every trouble, pray, praise, and give thanks. So here's the pattern. Luther says we should fear and love God so that we don't abuse the commandment, but we do this instead. So The commandment is, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. And that means we fear and love God so that we do not curse, swear, use satanic arts, lie, or deceive by his name. Okay? So what am I supposed to do? Call on him in every trouble. Pray to him. Talk to him all the time about anything and everything. Praise him for his grace, his mercy, his loving kindness. Give thanks. Giving thanks is really important in life. All right, third commandment. We'll do this one and one more. Third commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Okay, so what's the Sabbath? You have to go back all the way to the beginning of your Bibles, to the first book, Genesis, to the first chapter, verse 1 through the first half of chapter 2, verse 4. It's a long verse, so the first half of verse 4. And you have this song, a poem, if you will, about creation. And the refrain of the thing is, it was evening and it was morning the first day, it was evening and it was morning the second day. On the sixth day, God says he's completed everything that he needs to do for the creation to exist. Everything that is comes into being at his word, and it's all completed. And God pronounces a benediction upon the creation. He says that it's very good. And then on the seventh day, God rests. Okay, R-E-S-T. That's a Sabbath. And so there's a commandment here to honor God by keeping every seventh day as a rest in his honor. And so the Sabbath for Jews begins at Friday at sundown, because the song goes, it was evening, it was morning. So the Sabbath begins at sundown on Saturday, the last day of the week, and it goes all the way till sundown, the end of the first day of the week, which we call Sunday, which is actually a Latin for Saturn, but we don't want to get into that. So the Sabbath is Friday into Saturday. And the way the Jews keep that is they gather in their homes. The mother does this beautiful prayer. She lights 2 candles and her hands are swirling. She calls in the Sabbath, and they have a meal together and so forth. And they don't do any work, nor anybody in their household or their animals. It's a day of rest. Put everything aside. Without getting into the religious end of it in terms of all the prayers and the new moons and all that kind of stuff, my wife and I decided we were going to start keeping the Sabbath, and now I look forward to it. And the blessing, if you're in Israel and the Sabbath is approaching, your friends will say, Shabbat Shalom. May you enjoy the peace of the Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom. So, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Luther's going to translate that to us pagan, Gentile Christians. What does this mean? Veristas. We should fear and love God so that we do not despise preaching in his word. So Luther's saying, these folks that I don't want to bother to go to a public worship service on the day for public worship, and it's like, I'm too good for it, I don't need it, blah, blah, blah. Luther says, don't do that, but instead, hold the day sacred, go to worship, gladly hear the reading and the explanation of the Word of God, and learn it. Okay, one last thing that goes on that tablet having to do with God, and we'll take a break and start up again in another video. Fourth commandment. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 have to do with the relationship with God, and they're properly on one tablet. Honor your father and mother. We touched on this a little bit before. Honor your father and mother. They give you life. They take care of you. They teach you and so forth. They are your principal teachers and so forth and so on. They literally have this priestly function where they stand between you and God as a conduit of his blessing. And he says, honor them. And so what does this mean? That we should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents. You have to live in community with them and other authorities, okay? So the teacher, the cop, and so forth. But, so we don't dishonor them, make them angry and frustrated and stuff because of our bad behavior, but instead we honor them, we treat them well, we serve them, we obey them, we love them, we cherish them. Now, truth of the matter is, all human beings are sinners and broken, and there are some people who somehow manage to sire a child, and they are a lousy parent. Okay? You're still supposed to honor them. You don't have to be stupid about it, though. You do not have to do irresponsible things. You do not have to accept abuse and so forth. And that's hard. And my heart goes out to anybody that is called to honor a very broken parent. But we can't get into it here and all of its details. I just want to say is it is possible to honor the role without putting yourself in the position of being beaten or abused or neglected and so forth, taken an unhealthy advantage of and so forth. So that's a very special issue. By the grace of God, most parents try hard, and they may be flawed, and they may have limited vision and all that kind of stuff. Mark Twain said, when I turned 21, it was amazing how smart my father became. But anyway, so that's getting into the catechism. That's the first tablet in the Ten Commandments having to do with our relationship with God. Once again, that parent commandment is on the God side of the table because they stand in the place of God for us as his agents who give us life and give us instruction, Torah. So, God bless. There'll be another video out shortly. I got to stay ahead of this confirmation class because they're good and fast. And so, talk to you soon.